Did they go to the movies last night? Yes, they are. No. Yes, they were. No. Yes, they did. No. Which answer is correct and why? Let's find out. Hi everyone, today you're going to learn how to answer yes/no questions correctly. Yes/no questions are questions which are answered by either saying yes or no. Many students think that these kind of questions are really difficult, but they're actually very easy because most of the time you just answer the question by using the word that is in the question. So if you watch until the end of the video, you will think that answering these questions is very easy. If you're ready to get started, let's get it. Let's first talk about the verb to be. The verb to be has three main forms in the present. They are is, am, and are. We say he, she, it is, I am, we, you, they are. It's very important to remember this when answering questions because you always have to use the correct form of the verb to be with each subject. Now let's have a look at some examples. Is the movie good? We can answer this in two main ways. We can say yes, we can say no. This is fine and this is correct. You can always answer yes or no questions by just saying yes or no. We can also say yes, it is, or we can say no, it isn't. So how do we know which word to use in the answer? Well, it's actually very easy. We just look at the question and use the auxiliary verb from the question. The auxiliary verb in this question is the word is. So to answer the question, we just use the word is. Yes, it is, or no, it isn't. Now let's talk about am. A lot of the time you won't really hear questions with the word am in it because if you're using the word am, that means you are asking a question about yourself. For example, am I hungry? We can answer by saying yes, I am, or no, I am not. How do we know which word to use in the answer? Again, we take it from the question. Am I? Yes, I am. Or no, I am not. Now let's talk about are. For example, are they going to the party? We can say yes, they are, or we can say no, they are not. When we are answering yes or no questions with the word are, we always need to think about the subject and use the correct form of the verb to be. In this sentence, the subject is they, and the correct form of the verb to be, which goes with they, is are. That's why we say yes, they are, or no, they are not. Now, if the question was, are you going to the party? We would need to change the answer because if I ask you a question, then you need to answer by saying I. That means I is the subject. And which form of the verb to be do we use with I? It's am. So you could say, yes, I am, or no, I am not. Now let's talk about the past tense of the verb to be, which is was or were. We say he, she, it, I, was. We say you, we, they, were. For example, was he a teacher? We can say yes, he was, or no, he was not. Again, we use the was from the question in the answer. Another example could be, were they at the park? The answer is either yes, they were, or no, they were not. Again, we just use were from the question in the answer. But what about if the question was, were you at the park? What is the answer? Well, the answer is yes, I was, or no, I was not. Why? Because I am asking you a question, and when you answer, you need to use I. And I is the subject, So that means you need to use was with I. Yes, I was. No, I wasn't. Now let's talk about has, have, and had. We say he, she, it has. We say I, you, we, they have. When we use the word had, we can use that with any subject. I had, you had, they had, he had. For example, has he got a phone? The answer is either yes, he has, or no, he has not. We simply use the has from the question in the answer. Another example could be, have they been to America? The answer is either yes, they have, or no, they have not. Again, the question uses have, so in the answer, we also must use have. What about if the question was, had you ever seen her before? What is the answer? Well, the answer is either yes, I had, or no, I had not. Remember, when using the word had, we can use it with any subject. Now let's talk about do, does, and did. We use do with I, you, we, and they. We use does with he, she, and it. We can use did with any subject. For example, he did, she did, they did, I did, you did. For example, do they like sport? The answer is either yes, they do, or no, they don't. We have used do in the question, so we need to use do in the answer. Another example could be, does he like learning English? The answer is either yes, he does, or no, he does not. We have used does in the question, so again, we need to use does in the answer. Easy, right? Now let's look at did. For example, did he want a pizza? The answer is either yes, he did, or no, he didn't. Remember, did has been used in the question, so we need to use did in the answer. Also, we can use did with any subject. Now let's talk about will. Will is really easy because you can use will with any subject. I will, she will, he will, it will, you will, they will. For example, will you be going to China next year? The answer is either yes, I will, or no, I won't. We have used will in the question, so again, we need to use will in the answer. Another example could be, will they get a drink? The answer is either yes, they will, or no, they won't. Will is in the question, so again, will must be in the answer. Now let's talk about modal verbs. Modal verbs are words like can, could, should, would, and may. When you're using modal verbs, you can use them with any subject. For example, he can, she can, it can, they can, you can, I can. This is all correct. An example question could be, would you like to go to the beach? The answer is either yes, I would, or no, I would not. Would is in the question, so we need to use would in the answer. Another example could be, may I go to the bathroom? The answer is either yes, you may, or no, you may not. May is in the question, so again, we need to use may in the answer. You see, guys, answering questions in English is very easy if you know how.